Okay, sure.
Sorry, I think there's a slideshow.
Jude, if you just said present to the right top corner,
Yeah,
that would.
top right hand corner, Jude. Next to share, there is present, right? Just click on that. Right side, Jude.
Right
Right
side.
side. Share के बाजू में.
Hello, hello.
Yeah, Jude.
Yeah, all right. So hi students. Good morning. And so today, like we're making one presentation every class, and so today's presentation is actually about explorations, and what we're talking about is looking at certain interesting projects where uh, certain key ideas have given rise to a landscape scheme. Yeah, so now the disclaimer to this is that this is, this is landscape architecture seen from an architect's viewpoint. Yeah, so I'm not a landscape architect. So therefore, these are things that I find interesting, as an architect. So that's kind of the disclaimer on this presentation. Hello, hello.
Yeah, we can hear you, Jude.
Yes, we
Yeah.
can hear you.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna dive right in. Okay. So the first project is actually called the Infinity Bench, um, and the idea that one is looking at is actually looking at how one uses geometry to create a sense of place. All right. So this is actually an existing project. It's a park. Yeah, and there was a path. So if you follow my mouse, there's a path which actually moved through the path through the park, and it was basically a through. Like people are walking through the park, but no one ever stopped and sat down and kind of. There was no pause within that park. So the intervention was actually the simple intervention of a perfect circle, which was actually called the Infinity Bench, and so the path is maintained the way it is. The all of the vegetation has not been touched. This is as it is. All the intervention does is just rings this bench, and through that simple act, it actually creates a pause, a space of pause, a space for people to gather. And there's a school nearby, so kids come, and after school, during school, and this then becomes a place for people to actually come together. So just a simple intervention, and that's it. I mean, that's the intervention in this project. I thought this is a good starting point, and of course, how it the decisions on, for example, color, like just painting it red, making no attempt to kind of blend in, but saying that okay, this is fine, this is man-made addition, this is added on, and it stands out as such, and that contrast with the landscape, with the flowers which fall at it on it, also kind of add to uh, the fact that this is something which is added on, this is something which was not there earlier. Yeah, so how it kind of reacts with the existing elements of is my slide changing? Yeah, okay. Existing elements and the existing vegetation of the park. Yeah, I think there's a lag between my slide changing and this. Yeah, so this is a more aerial view of it, and yeah, so this is the entire ring which comes together. It's called the Infinity Bench, and it's actually, if you look closely, you will see, and there are drawings for it. This is actually modular, so it's also in the way that it's put together. It's yeah. So there are these modules, and these modules are actually then slotted one next to each other, and that kind of rings and comes together to form a larger ring. So I hope you can see the drawing. Has my slide changed? Uh,
Not for me. Yeah,
No,
it
not.
has. It has. It has.
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
okay, okay. I think there's some lag for some reason. Yeah. So this is a drawing of that module, which actually then repeats and forms that circle. This is timber painted, bright red, and then the planks come over it, and that actually forms the surface on which people sit. So a very small, simple intervention, and extremely profound. I thought, like in the way that um, it makes place out of nothing at all, kind of. So it's then a place that, and very interesting drawings, like because there's a school nearby, it can become a place where people gather, and it's a space for in instructive mode of teaching. When someone has a blackboard or is teaching people who are gathering around, can also be a place where it's a more individual mode of kind of doing art, in this case, in this drawing, where individuals can kind of set up their easels and have and then the bench kind of becomes a place where things rest against, whether it's a mirror or whether it's another painting. So that bench becomes more than just a place for sitting, and of course a place for quiet contemplation, where an individual can just be there alone by herself. Yeah. um, and of course a concert kind of situation, where that individual is now not one person but there are many others, and there's a concert in the so a nice drawing for context, where you see what's around it, so you kind of get a sense of the school nearby, and the street, and then how this and look at the drawing. I mean, all that is only the intervention is colored, everything else is just grayscale. Yeah. And yeah, the plan, where somehow you see the resonance between the way that they draw the trees, and the way they draw the ring, the bench. So that's um, that's the plan. I don't know if it's changed. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So this is the first project. uh, so this is in Chile, and somehow this drawing that you're seeing right now, the synthesis drawing, as we call it here, it kind of makes these references to very Latin American kind of style of painting, and just this, again, this whole idea is expressed in a more abstract way, but it kind of makes its point. Yeah. So I think this is an interesting project in the way that not only what the intervention was made, but also in the way it's communicated. Yeah, so that's the first project. We now move somewhere closer home, which is in Bangladesh, in Dhaka. I called this, not changed. Yeah, it's changed. Okay. Symbol and meaning. Yeah, so this is in Dhaka University, and Dhaka, Bangladesh, as you guys must know, is had a war of liberation. When they were part of Pakistan, and then they actually had a war of liberation where they broke off from Pakistan. And in Dhaka University, there was a place to commemorate the martyrs of who died in this war. Yeah, so uh, so this is like an aerial shot of the intervention. So it's within a larger campus, and is it changed? Yeah. Okay. So it's within a larger campus, and this is like an octagon, which is kind of placed in the middle of that campus. So this is the intervention with a symbolic tree, which is sitting, within the water. That's the plumeria, I think. I mean, Sandeep and others could correct me once you see the image if it's wrong. And so it's a very classical, axis. It's on axis. So you see this. There's almost like the you see memorials. This idea of the axis becomes very important, and the tree in the center. But there are little moves which are interesting, which kind of take it away from that classical rigid kind of form. And the first thing, obviously, you can see is that octagon keeps rotating as it goes down, and it forms steps and finally it kind of ends in the pond. What you see here is a fountain, and from this fountain we'll see what happens. Yeah, so this is that the outer octagon, which then so we typically see amphitheaters, where everything is paved and it becomes very impervious. But this case, even the amphitheater kind of seating has these bits of grass within, changing in width, and that also helps in the perviousness, so that water is absorbed into the soil, and it's also much more softer as a move. Imagine if it was not there and all of these were paved all across, it would not give the same sense of space. Yeah, so this is the edge of the fountain. So which is the overflow of the fountain. I think it's not changed again. I'll just wait for it to change. Okay, has it changed? Okay, it has. Yeah. All right. So this is the edge of the fountain, and here you see the overflow of the fountain in this brass. I believe it's a brass gutter, an overflow spout, and from here it actually then it overflows into these steps, and then it goes into that pond in the center, and then the whole process repeats as a cycle. So another shot of what is this exactly doing. So you have the fountain, this is the axis. At the end of the axis here, I don't know if you can see it in this image, but that's where the martyrs plaques are and the names of the martyrs, and the water overflows and it kind of trickles over. This is the larger kind of complex where, again,
Uh, can you all hear Jude?
No,
No, Sandeep.
no, we
Yeah.
lost.
Okay. Jude. I think we lost your voice. Like we can't hear you.
hello.
Hi, Jude. Yeah. Now you're back. Yeah. Sorry, we lost you for a second. Like your voice. Yeah.
Okay. So this is the larger campus, and we see the idea of permeability of the landscape, where the benches also are kind of taken off the ground, and instead of some hard paving, you actually see that it's grating, and so water can actually percolate down onto the ground. So yeah, so this is the fountain to one end, and then you see the ornamental tree in the center, and at this end you see, on axis, you see the martyrs plaques. Yeah, so okay. Right, so this is within a larger campus, like I said, and this is another shot again looking at the water, which actually is kind of coming down from that fountain. And again, look at the this it kind of overflows from kind of basin to basin. All of these are made in brass, and then they contrast with the the green and the softness of the landscape around. Yeah.
It is indeed a plumeria tree, Jude. Yeah.
All right.
You were right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all right. So just a little bit again about, I mean, the idea of looking at certain symbols and motifs, and if you see this jagged profile, which is kind of the way that the fountain form is kind of created, and then we can go back to it. Little details on how the water kind of moves through these little basins and then overflows one to the next. Yeah, and okay, so these are just images. I think I don't need to speak about it, but again, I found this project very interesting because it it kind of allows nature to be, in the sense that there is no manicuring of the landscape, but it also makes a very strong kind of spatial space, it creates spatial mood, it creates a sense of place, it creates a sense of this idea of the symbolism of the landscape is pretty much spot on. Yeah. Sandeep, you want to add anything to this?
No, I think it's a very, very nicely executed project, Jude. I think we can move on to the next.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So just a little bit of the paving where you see, these terracotta blocks, and so if you're looking at the profile of that fountain, you then see that profile of the fountain reflected in the way like the walls are created, where the brick is kind of kept angular, so you get the same kind of jagged sawtooth pattern which happens across the walls which are created within the landscape. Yeah, so we'll move next, and again, yeah, this is the overall shot where you see the two main elements of the landscape. You see the octagon, the circle in the center, the fountain, and at the square with the martyrs plaques at one end. Yeah. Um, right. So this is the idea of one element which is taken and it becomes many things. So one element does many things. It's called Park and Play, and it's in Denmark. Yeah. Okay. Has anyone seen this project? I just like some feedback from students. Has anyone seen this project? Knows about it? Anyone? Yes. No. Quickly.
Yeah, I have read about it.
Great. Great. All right. So this is actually so again, I think the red line. So if you follow the red line and you see that this is something which kind of makes its way around here and then goes back down and goes here. Yeah. So one element which is the single red element, the linear element, probably a pipe. Yeah. And it does things across this landscape and then goes back down. So what is this exactly? Okay. So this is actually a parking lot. Okay. It's a multi-story parking lot. And what do you do with the roof of such a parking lot? Yeah. So they actually converted this roof into a park. Yeah. So this is that parking lot. This is the facade of it. And this is that red element that you see where my mouse is moving. Now, this is it's not a railing. I mean, it's something higher than a handrail. Uh, Sorry. Yeah. Um, it's higher than a handrail, and then it's the same painted red, and then it's something which actually then pulls you up, because you want to actually tell people that there's a park on top, and this red line kind of becomes that line which leads you to the park. Yeah. And of course the facade uh, of the entire garage is of the parking garage is completely green. So you have planters hanging on the edge. You have wire mesh, and the plants are the creepers are left to climb over the entire facade. Yeah, so this is where you kind of start turning the edge, and then the red line kind of continues. From inside the garage as well, you sense so you can see the handrail, and you can see the higher kind of barrier, which is that red pipe. You see the entire thing, which kind of takes you from the bottom, goes all the way up. And okay, waiting for it to change. Yeah, so this is the entire facade where you can see, that red rail rising. This is the entire building where, seen on the square on which it sits. And you see a little bit, popping up at the top, and you realize that, okay, this is an active roofscape. It's not a passive, dead roof. And yeah, okay, slides not changing. Yeah. Okay, so once you reach the top, then you actually realize that it's the same red pipe which actually then winds its way around and creates various. It's a playscape. Yeah, so there are various kind of different kinds of activities that it supports. In this case, there are swings. Then you have these places where people can hang and do exercise. This is where that pipe actually supports a jali kind of here, so that if you're playing any sport with a ball or something like that, it's held in. Here it's like almost like a jungle gym kind of thing. And yeah, so it's the same element which then kind of creates these multiple variety of playscapes. And very very powerfully, very interesting the way it does it. Yeah. And the center is actually, I don't know if I have an image, but this is a trampoline in the center. And what's interesting is that it's uh, it's open all the way down, like so if you're jumping on top of this, like your 5 stories is nothing below you. And you can also, from below the garage, you can look up through this, so it also acts like a light shaft to kind of bring light deep into the center of the building. And you can look up and see children jumping. So it's very interesting how it makes a relation with the architecture, with the building below. And this is that pipe which kind of then rises, and it becomes like a place where children can jump on, climb on. Yeah. And support to the swings, where different kinds of swings also. So if you see, like it's not the typical swings you see in these BMC parks, like or any kind of corporate parks. Like it's various, like you have the individual one, you have a tire, and you have something where the whole family can sit. Yeah. And yeah, so again, like the green is allowed to climb onto the elements. And yeah. All right. So that's it. I think this is the next project. Sandeep, you want to add?
Yeah, Jude. Thanks. Students, if you actually look at the plan, right, of this project, it may seem to be extremely simple. It may seem as if ये तो कुछ भी नहीं है, this is just one squiggly line that starts from a spiral and then just kind of goes to the drawing. But then once Jude starts explaining, each of those elements and the thought that has gone behind it, you realize that how intricate, or how detailed each of these things are, how much thought has gone behind every single move. So I think that's very important. Like the simplicity of the drawing shouldn't fool you in understanding a project. You know. Yeah.
Right.
Thanks. That's it. And
Yeah.
also, if this project were to be executed in India, maybe a little bit of shade would have been good.
Right.
Because it's in Scandinavia, it's in Denmark. The idea is that like you need as much of sunlight as is possible, right? But in India, things would have been different. We would have had more trees or some level of shade, etc. Yeah.
Correct. Correct. Right.
Thanks, Jude.
Yeah. All right. So that's the project. And any questions from anyone so far? Should we move? Rain shelter. Yeah. All right. So and I like this photograph. Okay, I don't know if photos are changing for you guys. Can you see a girl with a mobile phone? No? Okay, you can. Yeah.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
We can.
Yeah. So I mean, it's interesting, like how a landscape accommodates various kinds. Like you have this little boy who was playing football in one of those netted areas and comes for a break. And you have this, too cool to play kind of girl who's just sitting and chatting on her phone, and there's space for her as well. Like so it's it creates these multiple moments and spaces for all the different kinds of people who come and look at the I mean, these are not definitely not staged photographs. Like in a lot of times you see stage photos, but you can tell that, like this is just a extremely successful public space. Yeah. All right, I think we'll move. Okay, this is just a detail of the facade. Little more like coming out and looking at the building. Yeah. All right, so just I mean, bits of signage, and you look at how the signage also tells you about the building. Yeah. Okay, just running through these. Okay, so the next project is now, um, I mean, this is actually again in Denmark. It's called Remis Parken. Yeah, so uh, uh, I mean, this is more of, so now we've looked at some projects where you have a more kind of singular idea, and this is also an intervention within a neighborhood park. So you see that I mean, but there are various ideas in this. So I wouldn't say that this is in the same vein as the previous three projects. It has a mix of ideas and brilliant projects. So I just put it here. So one is the path, which is again, look at the fact that water is allowed to accumulate where naturally it will kind of collect, and you still want a path. So the path is a pervious metal mesh over it. Again, the playscapes are not the typical ones, and they're actually right in the center of this is an avenue. This is an avenue which is part of the previous park, and typically avenues are very ceremonial, and bang in that avenue they place a very fun uh, place. And so look at the path which kind of runs through. So this is the intervention, which is all that's added after the mature vegetation. And this is the path, and look at how it almost like a carpet sits on the landscape. So it's not, you don't go and flatten out an existing slope. You work with the existing slopes and allow it to be. Yes, a little detail of that grating on which people walk, and so you see water below, and it's allowed to be the way it is. And of course, like you're also looking at so it's not only the natural which kind of takes precedence, but something as kind of built up as a skate park. So this is a skate park where all the paths converge, and this is a park where kids can skate. And so this is the entrance to the park, very kind of subtle way in which the entrance is demarcated. um, yeah and again, I mean, play equipment kind of becomes these large portals. So it almost becomes sculptural. You've blown it up, and it becomes sculptural within the landscape. And okay, so moving on. Sandeep, you want to add anything?
No, Jude. I think you can move on. That was
Yeah.
well explained.
Yeah, all right. So fine. So I think this is the Remis Park in. These are the paths, like so where you. So obviously this is not it's not barrier free. Okay, so what is barrier free is you can take a wheelchair, and anyone with on a wheelchair should be able to access. So obviously this is not going to constitute as barrier free, but there will be another path. So it's not that someone on a wheelchair is denied access. Yeah, so even in case of the previous project, there would be a lift, like so those who can't use the elevator, the stair, will use the lift. Yeah, but all of the rest of the park will be accessible to anyone. Yeah, you cannot build a public park where a section of the population cannot use it. Yeah, so you have to be conscious of the fact that it has to be accessible to all. And then this is where the active zone is, where all the paths converge, and this beautiful landscape created out of concrete, which is then the skate park. Yeah, and just a little bit of details of, like the I guess this is pebble finish, the edge, and then you see the concrete. Sandeep, you just want to explain a little
Yeah.
on this finish? Yeah.
Yeah, so the skate park finish would actually be a kind of smoother finish, even though it's kind of textured. But the edge is almost like a pebble dash, like wherein the wherein it's cast, because the edge is not actually exactly straight or a curve, right? I mean, it could move and do that. So it's basically cast in situ with stones in between. I mean, that's also to kind of give a different texture, because while you're on a skateboard, the moment it reaches the edges, the wheels would start giving out a certain sound, because of the difference in texture. Yeah.
Right. Right. Thanks, Sandeep. So yeah, so just a plan of the place where you see how it's kind of it makes its way within an existing neighborhood. And so you can see all the elements that we saw across this plan. Yeah. Now this project, the next project, is actually by RCR Architects. RCR, I hope you guys know, won the Pritzker 3 years ago. And so this is actually a wasteland. Like, you have a land where all you had is gravel and rocks, and which were either naturally kind of let there, or like it was almost like a dump. And they created this very sensuous, and RCR is known for the sensuousness of material with which they create their architecture. And this is something that carries into the landscape work. And very simple again, like, so you see these mounds of gravel, and instead of kind of making it pretty and throwing it away, all that is done is, like, you accentuate the slope, by these is just, I mean, these are pre-weathered steel. This is steel which is already weathered, so it has a coating on its surface, and therefore that coating acts as a protection, and it can be used outdoors. There's a brand also for this. It's called Corten, Corten. You might see a lot of architects use this. And so what RCR does is it kind of takes these mounds and cuts the path through the mound. Yeah. And of course, it's in Girona in Spain, and also gets kind of misty and magical, like, where you see this, these strange kind of silhouettes against the sky. And yeah, so you look at the path and you see it kind of dips down, it goes up, and you're surrounded by these mounds of gravel which are just held back by these walls which are made up. And again, look at the walls, because they're not opaque in the sense of just seeing steel, but you see these rocks peeping through. Yeah, so it's just using waste to actually create a landscape which is extremely sensuous, extremely evocative of the place as well. Because this is what the place is about. So they're not making it into like the previous projects, or you saw that it became into an active park. It's not about that. It's just about appreciating the landscape for whatever it is. Yeah. So that's a reading. I mean, it's a personal reading as well of how, like, how successful this project is. Yeah. The same gravel is kind of used to become the paths that one is kind of cutting through. Yeah. So that's it. So that's the intervention. Of course, it's a larger project. Okay. So that is interesting to see these watercolors, like, uh, so we're so kind of caught up in the digital. RCR is more traditional in that sense that they work a lot with models, with hand, with paintings. And it's wonderful that they're able to still do the work is not conventional, though the methods might be using traditional watercolor kind of methods, and but beautifully done. I mean, like, it's just the if you look at what was seen and what was drawn, and, like, how much um, resonance is there between the sketch and between the image. Yeah. Yeah, so I thought it's just interesting. So, I mean, just a note to everyone, like, I mean, we don't expect that everyone comes with these chaka-chak kind of Photoshop renderings. Whatever kind of uh, one is drawn by, if it's hand drawing or if it's watercolor, I think you should kind of play it to your advantage. Yeah. All right. So this is the larger plot, of course, and what we saw was this little those little triangles here. Yeah. Okay, Sandeep, do you wanna?
Yeah, I think it's a very very beautiful project, in the sense that the actual site is not been obliterated. Like everything is kept the way it is, and then most of these interventions are just where it needs to be, and that's the same in the earlier project that Jude had shown as well. Like wherein there was just this one perforated pathway that kind of sits onto the rest of the landscape. So out here as well, like the experience. One is like we look at it from the perspective of a plan. The second is we look at it from the perspective of a human being moving through the spaces, and when one does that, then you'll realize, the magic that it creates, the level differences, the way that, the pathway that we are walking in, which is kind of sunken in, and the slant with which the cotton steel members are placed, the angles, like it's very intelligently done. Like so when you move through, your viewpoint keeps shifting. The vista keeps shifting because you're actually made to move through it, and you don't really get a sense of the scale of the space in one go. Like once you're inside, you feel like it's a long walk, but in reality, it may just be like on the other side. Yeah, yeah. That's it. Thanks, Ruth.
Right. Thanks. Puneet. So yeah, so you saw the hand drawings and you see the digital, so very carefully done as well. Okay, this is in China. This again, I mean, a natural. So that was kind of man-made because it was gravel and waste, and this is very interesting natural feature. And again, the landscape intervention was actually more in terms of the ecological rather than the visual. Like it's not so much because the visual of the landscape itself was so strong. All they had to do was little bits here and there. Yeah, so this is called the reticulated red earth park. Um, so before I get you inside the park, look at this wall. So you guys have heard of rammed earth, I hope. Yes, no.
Yes, sir.
Students.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. Okay. So this rammed earth wall is actually made from the soil from the park itself, and it's over the years, like the soil, the layers of the soil actually they accumulate since it's sedimentary, and this rammed earth wall was made in a way that it actually follows um, the kind of the period from which that the soil was taken. So going from the older all the way to the newer soil. So I mean, by itself, the architecture kind of educates and becomes something that speaks about before. Then this is before you enter the project. Okay. Again, you see that there is a step, but there is a ramp here. So one has to be kind of conscious of. Yeah, and this is actually the natural landscape, which is this these kind of almost lunar kind of landscape, and the green in between. And then the interventions are actually these little lookout points. And of course, I don't mean to say that that's the only intervention, because there's actually much more which is done to preserve, which is more in terms of some things which are not visible, in terms of looking at the water systems, looking at how so this does not actually allow water to percolate. So therefore, like creating areas where water does percolate and support the landscape all the way around. Yeah. So or if you look here, this little bit here of this, if you can see my mouse, but straight ahead, center of the screen, you can see a little lookout point. Yeah. So it just looks out onto this landscape, an aerial view of these mounds. And so what's interesting is that the landscape is interpreted. Yeah. So if you look at the sketches, okay, this is another image of where do you pick these vistas? Like where you open up vistas of the landscape, which are truly spectacular, and also the time of the day, and how the light kind of hits the land. Yeah, and then this is kind of the other bits, which is more grassy grassland. And obviously it's not again, you look at the character of the landscape, it is landscape as kind of nature planned it, so it's just sorry, is my screen on? Yeah, so that's little bit of the drawings which show how the various kind of vistas that are opened up to people, and where does that pathway sit, where do those lookout points sit. Look at the series of sketches on the right, where this is the natural landscape, but how is it interpreted as like a little place where children can climb over it, form a bridge across it. So the interventions are interpreting what is there in front of you in terms of the landscape. Yeah, so put a small chair into it, or you create little holes in it. Yeah. All right, so that's the project. I'll just move next. Okay, so this is a pocket park. So it's called a pocket park, and it's literally just a tiny space in between buildings, and you see the image of how it used to be. Yeah. So this is in Shanghai, and like Shanghai, you must know, like Bombay, it's a space where it's a city which is extremely dense at the center, and this is a space between buildings where just this simple act of the planting and this mirrored kind of um experience which is created, which expands the space and creates again just the use of these grasses and these flowering plants. Again, Sandeep, I guess you can correct me with the right kind of terminology. But yeah, so this
You're
is
right. You're spot on. Yeah.
okay. So this is the little bit onto the street, so it's almost this secret little thing which makes its presence. Again, this is cotton steel. um I don't know if my image has changed. I'm looking at the street. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it
And
has.
this, yeah. So this little indirect path again, like what Sandeep was saying, that you're actually not showing it all at one go. You kind of pull people indirectly and then you take them within. And this is how that space, just, I mean, is simple and kind of interesting way of using mirrors to expand that space. And this seeing multiple reflections of both people and of the landscape, and it expands that little space in between. And okay, Sandeep, could you maybe help them with, what do you think these grasses might be, because they have a little kind of
They look like fountain grass. It's called pennisetum, but I'm not sure. It could be a different species as well because it's China, right? But
right,
the Indian
yeah,
equivalent that you would find is basically pennisetum cetaceum. I mean, I can type it down. It's called
right,
fountain grass. Yeah.
yeah, great, thanks, Sandeep. So so you look at again, look at the details. So you see that this little thing here, the black, I don't know again if you can see my mouse, right bottom of the screen, is a floor light. Like, so when you do all of this, you want to see that people don't stumble in the dark, but at the same time you don't want to see silly light fixtures all over the place. Yeah. um all right. So this is it. That's the project. I mean, this is just use of mirror, use of planting, use of a path which kind of wiggles its way through. And uh, you know and yeah, that's and interestingly, this is not, I mean, it's not really it's not very permanent, and it's also um yeah, thanks, Sam. So it's also, it's a developer project. Yeah. So I mean, this is a project where probably these buildings are going to get torn down, and like in China, things appear overnight. So you see that it's also kind of a place which is talking of what's going to come. But I mean, just for a developer project to be such so sensitive, I thought was very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and the use
Okay.
of the mirror, it actually kind of, it doubles the space, the perception of the space. In reality, it's only like it's a very, very narrow kind of a corridor. It's almost like a setback of a building, right, Jude?
Correct. Correct. This is the image. So
Yeah.
uh, this is what it was like. I mean, this is all that is there. Like, imagine that you have, I mean, all of you guys have kind of looked at tiny spaces. We are saying 25 square meters. So I mean, I hope we don't see mirrors in all of your projects, but I mean, this was it has this kind of these high walls on both sides, and so it kind of worked in this case. But this is one way of kind of looking at a tiny space, but extremely successful. And I mean, to transform a space like this into a space like this is, I mean, I think that's actually the power of landscape architecture. Yeah. All right. A nice drawing again. So you see the paving, you see the soil, the fertile soil at the top, you see the hard strata below, and you see the drain also drawn, all the technical details. And here is where you realize that look at this. What does this show? It just shows a framing, and it's mounted. This. So it's not glass mirror. It's probably a a polished metal mirror, because it kind of bends onto this frame. So from the construction itself, you can tell that it's not permanent. It's not intended to stay there for 25, 30 years. Yeah. But that was the nature of the project. Okay. Um, Quick one. This is just, I found it interesting, a different kind of way of looking at landscape, almost like, we spoke of geometry in the first project of the circle, which is like a 2D geometry. Here you see that using the kokedama. So the kokedama are these little balls of which are covered with moss. It's a Japanese term where you kind of grow these plants in these little balls of moss. And again, I'm sure I'm getting it wrong in terms of the technical description, but I mean, yeah, that's what it does. And so there's an installation made with just those kokedamas. This is the idea, where there's the light framing, and this these balls are actually then held on top of this framing to create a bowl. So you saw the 2D circle, and here you see a 3D kind of creation of this bowl with a path which kind of cuts its way through. Yeah, so this is an installation. It's just uh, you know probably a demonstration of something, but it's an installation within a park. So it's also an interesting way to kind of look at landscape. We're looking at something which is uh, not very permanent, and we're also seeing that something which is not very rooted. It's uprooted. Everything is raised on these little very fine framework. Yeah, and this is the plan. um, yeah, so just like almost like a pie chart, which is this circle, and you see this a little bit pulled out of it. And yeah, so that's it. I mean, it's just this using an element like the kokedama ball, which creates this wonderful experience for people to just, I mean, it's just that, you walk through, so there's no pause in this. Might have been interesting to maybe put a little seats within it, but for whatever reason, it's just a walkthrough. Yeah. um and it can also be, in a sense, renewable. If these are and Sandeep could probably come in, in terms of, it could be a nursery, where you grow these things and then you take them and you transplant them. I don't know if that's done, Sandeep. Do you think that's possible?
Yeah, it is, but it definitely is possible, and I think moss balls are basically used also traditionally for that purpose as well, like when plants have to be transported to a great longer distance. In the past, they used to use these moss balls as a what do you call it, as a planter, which will hold water. Like today we have modern technology that could do it, but this installation, I think the purpose of it is just that, like it's an installation for a certain amount of time, and after that it'll all be like taken away to different parts of the city and then kind of planted. But what's also very beautiful about this is the fact that they are trying to create a surface which is actually not a solid surface. It's very porous. And so when you see it from a distance, or when you're within it, or when you're seeing it from a building that's nearby, like an aerial view that Jude is right now showing, it gives you very different experiences. And I think to kind of imagine this up and kind of actually draw this out and do it, I think it's beautiful. Yeah. Thanks, Jude.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So we move next. Okay, just some images. Also, the construction drawings, of this. I mean, it's again, it's simple, but getting the heights, just the logic of construction is also something that is part of the process. It's not you have an idea and it just happens magically on site. You kind of follow it through to its last detail. Yeah. And this is that last detail. Looking at how the kokedama actually sits on the, like a spike, and it kind of sits with onto that. Yeah. With the threading and there's also some string to locate the opening. So yeah, so very interesting. We'll share this presentation so you guys can go through it. And yeah. All right. So this next project is actually, I mean, it's a personal favorite it's a classic. It's an old project by Enrique Mirale, and it's not. I mean, I would not say that, like, we talk about it for the landscape, but it's kind of one of those projects. I'm sure all of you guys must have seen this in your theory of design or some of these classes. I hope you have. And I thought we'll talk about it today because, so firstly, the project. So firstly, do you guys know about it, or should I kind of talk about the project? Students? Hello?
Students, you
Can
guys
you
are
talk
there, right?
about it?
Sorry?
Yeah,
Can
Tanvi
you talk
says.
about it?
Yeah, Tanvi
Okay,
says
Yeah,
let's talk about it.
we have not seen
fine.
this.
Okay,
Okay,
okay.
okay. Unfortunate, but I hope you guys are going to go and find out more about the project. Okay. So this is a cemetery. All right, it's in Spain, and this is within a quarry. All right, and of course an abandoned quarry. And so Enrique Mirale is unfortunately passed away very young, but amazing body of work within the time that he was active, very original. And so this is a place where obviously, like in cemetery, and then you have, the bones are interred and all of that. uh, and it's actually one in the way that the what is built in terms of architecture and what is built in terms of landscape are not very distinguishable. In some cases there would be a building underneath this, like in this case, it's slotted into the hill, but here it might just be the filling. Yeah. So so landscape elements like the Gabion wall also become kind of architectural elements. I mean, and not like there's distinction, but this kind of blurs those typical boundaries. And so, I mean, I've not focused here in this presentation on the architecture um, so much. So, but to know about the architecture is also important because it's about creating the sense of something missing. Like, so if you look at because that's what death does. It kind of takes something away from the living, and remembering that and kind of symbolizing that is something that this project does very beautifully. And so the same landscape. So I just titled it here as the landscape of loss, where there's a sense of this the scattering of these things which don't seem to be in place. You see this timber like almost like the railway sleepers. You see these sleepers under railway tracks, and they're almost scattered within not a very with no apparent pattern to them. Yeah. And you also see that the perforated wall and the shadow that it throws on the landscape. And of course, these are old photographs. They might be a little pixelated. And then these are those the areas where for Christians, like they will have these little crypts, where the bones are finally after they're kept there, and then you can come and keep flowers, for them. I mean, to commemorate. And then the landscape is this hard paved surface in between with the trees kind of popping through, and you see these these little bits which are very almost sprinkled across the land. Yeah. Which and these are all timber which is embedded into the land. Yeah. These are the gates which open up into those the areas where again the crypt is located. Yeah, so this is a great project. I think you guys should look at it. Everyone should look at this project and study the plan. I've not put the plans here. And just a great example, and it's a path-breaking project architecturally. And yeah, so I just thought we should look at this project in terms of its landscape as well, and how the landscape and architecture, don't have very clear lines in between them. Yeah, this is the entrance gate. Like, what a strange gate, which, again, the sense of, this uh, things which, I mean, it's not the typical gate. Yeah. So you see these um, rods kind of up there in the air, and all you have to do is kind of roll them down, and then they collapse to form some kind of barricade. Yeah. So, I mean, the different elements that you can actually then creatively think based on, like, what's the final outcome of the space. All right. So that's Igualda. Sandeep, you wanna?
No, Jude, I think it's very important that you put this project because usually when one talks of landscape, one does not really think of a project like this. But like if the students actually go and explore, and I think it's good that you didn't put the plans because let them go and explore it because
Yeah.
there is a certain quality with which Enrique Miralles used to kind of imagine his buildings to be. And when I say imagine, like that probably would have been the start point of how a very tangible building kind of starts from, right? From these intangible thoughts or, like the lines and the squiggles. But there is a very innate understanding between how he imagined those spaces to be and the topography of the space, and especially in this particular Igualda symmetry. I think Igualda, right? Yeah, Igualda symmetry. Like there is the way that the land moves. Like the wall of the building then kind of continues to become a landscape in some areas, it's basically on a topographical like undulated kind of a land. And I think that's very very beautiful. So landscape does not necessarily have to be all green and flower laden, and like the usual imagination of what landscapes are when we talk of landscape. It does not have to be that. It could be a project which may look as banal as this is, but in reality is very very rich with these fine intricacies. Yeah, thanks Jude for this.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Um, sure. Okay. I think this is the last. No. Okay. I have. Okay. Two more. I'll just go quickly. All right. So again, I mean, this is again an architectural bias. So I mean, I'll go quicker. This is Junya Ishigami, and I just put these out there just for these projects which kind of blur the line between landscape. So this is actually a plaza in the Kanagawa Institute, and so it's interesting that I'd like some opinions at the end of this lecture. If someone thinks this is architecture landscape, or it doesn't matter, or what. Yes. So this is yeah. So this is a plaza, but it's, I don't know if it's indoor, outdoor. Yeah. So you can't really uh, put put a kind of label to it, because it's going to rain, it's going to snow into it. But then it's also built. The land and the roof, both of these are actually, it's again very very built. So is that architecture or is it landscape? I don't know. Yeah, and this is how it kind of sits, and creates a plaza. So it's actually a two-level plaza. One is the roof scape, which is itself, contoured, and then the groundscape, which is also contoured, and it sits on a contoured land. So it's this uh, very interesting kind of mix. And this is a construction image of yeah. So you see these kind of pre-stressed pre-stressing cables going across. You see the cutouts, and yeah. So just that. So I mean, just a question about, where do we kind of, or do we need to draw these lines, or is it interesting to look at buildings which are landscape which are buildings? So these just a project that I think that should spark some questions and some ideas, I hope. Yeah. um, all right. So yeah, so you see a window, and it's probably building, but you go on top and you realize there's no real enclosure as such. Yeah. Okay. Drawing of the building, again, it's almost drawn like a landscape. You see the contour lines, you see um, I mean, yeah, the contour is the main kind of way in which this is constructed. And yeah, so that's it actually. Yeah. Okay. I just want to. I have one last project, I think. Okay. Just run through. Okay. So this is a project I just kind of thrown in at the end. I think the presentation is done, but I just thought I'll put this in terms of looking at starting small and in terms of what interventions can be and how landscape can kind of add character, quality, life to a city and to a cityscape through things which are very small and it might seem unimportant in the larger scheme of things. Like we have these grand plans, but sometimes these tiny interventions make a big difference. Yeah. So this is in Toronto and the firm called Plant. And so the idea is that this is almost like a little. So you have a lay-by on a road, where a car can go and park, and this is that little pocket in between a couple of lay-bys, and you can see the construction to again understand that it's not seen as permanent. It's almost like an installation. All it does it allows people to sit face to face. Okay, that's it. Okay, and and sit and like this is next to a street. So it has its the colors are kind of taken from the street in the sense of barricades and all of that. And yes, and it's also seen from surrounding buildings. So if you see it in plan, it says face to face. And it's just these squiggly benches and tables, which people can just sit next to the road and and it's just one continuous thing. Yeah, so this is like a top view, and you see it's attached to a pavement. So you have a pavement, you're not touching the pavement, and this is the lay-by where a car can park. This is the lay-by on the other side where a car can park, and it just creates these two lay-bys and slotted onto the pavement. Um, you see these benches, and that's it. So so that's the project. And but such small projects and interventions into a city can also create life, create a sense of communality where people can come together, share a beer, talk to each other, talk to strangers, and it brings a certain sense of citizenship also. Too. We talk about citizenship so much. It's also about kind of just sitting across someone and talking to them. Yeah, someone you don't know. So that's it, and that's the project, and that's the presentation. So okay, so any questions? I think we can take it up. And yeah, so it's just that. Yeah, so this is the project. There's a tram moving next to it, and all right. I wanted one last image, which is there's one more. Okay, this is it. So this is uh, this is how it is built. Like it's on the street, so you can't really sit there and do concreting and paving and all of that. It's temporary. It's a preformed thing. It comes on a truck, and look at how kind of in a sense crude the construction is. Like it's just these wooden kind of pieces stacked together and sheet on top of it. So yeah, that's the presentation, and I think yeah, I hope it's been interesting. Yeah. Okay, I'm done, Sandeep.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Jude. I think it was a wonderful presentation. Uh, and if the other faculty members have to add something, they can, and then maybe we can start speaking to the students. Um, Saita, Shruti, Swati, Rutika.
I think it was super. I mean, the examples were very unique, and they were very different to. I mean, how different architects kind of perceive landscapes in different ways, which actually directly, indirectly, kind of even help the way people kind of interact with it. So yeah.
Yes, I think it was a very, very good presentation. And honestly, we would have never thought of putting up these examples while doing this topic. So it was genuinely a great idea, Sandeep, to have this mix of architects and landscape architects in the
It's
Uh,
Jude. Yeah, it's
yes.
Jude's ingenuity, not mine.
Uh, yes. Thank you so much, Jude. It was very nice.
Okay, thank you guys. I think students, if any questions or I think like what like you might have seen, like say work like Sana and Ishigami and like where these or even Enrique Mirale and these lines between architecture and landscape are blurred. So any kind of thoughts on that or any questions? I think be nice to hear. Yeah, I think we're probably have to move to our next stage of the project. So it's always nice to have some questions. So I think let's just spend 5 minutes on that. Sandeep, you think?
Yeah,
All right.
I think, yeah. So, students, if you notice, like from the first faculty lecture to the third lecture that we're having today, you would have noticed that, there is a way in which, things kind of change. Like, for example, the first one was all about images, like just drawings and, how do you kind of read it. The second one was kind of introducing those drawings to reality, to real projects. While this one was this particular lecture that we had today was from the other way around, right? Like Jude started showing you projects which are built, and then he showed you the way that these drawings may have been drawn up or have been depicted later on. So there is a certain reason why this is being done because the next stage of our exercise, like I hope all of you have given in your submissions. If any of you haven't, we'll speak about it at the end of the class because it's very very important that you submit your submissions on time, and which is why we had extended the deadline from 12 in the night to 8 in the morning. So yeah, so now we move to the next stage of that submission, okay, which is for which this particular presentation would be highly useful, because the way that the projects were being shown to you, like in the sense that there were these really tight small projects, but then which have an architectural component, but at the same time, there is the medium of expression, or the medium in which we were working was essentially landscape. Yeah, so which is why we wanted you to pay attention to it. So any questions, anything, any observations? I mean, it's not possible that you've nothing to share. Fleur looks like she has her hands up, like her her thumbnail image. Fleur, are you there?
Yeah, hi.
Hi. Yeah.
I
So
actually love the I actually love the project with the the staircase on both the sides of the parking lot, and the because it has a way of like pulling you up to that. Because I like when I first saw it, I was wondering how people would end up climbing all those stairs and actually go on top. But then when I saw how like the same element was like pulling you up, I figured out like probably that made them curious and like wanted to see what's on top. So I found that very interesting, that whole project.
Right. Shravan.
Yeah, I think until very recently, like till this studio started, I've had this idea of landscape as this very green space. But it was really interesting to see, like, these projects which have like almost no green cover, but still like have such an interesting kind of landscape. The idea of landscape, the open environment, and like smaller scale architecture, where like landscape and architecture are kind of coming down to the same thing eventually.
Right. Right. Yeah. Chirag.
Chirag.
Yeah, in the first two presentations, we were looking at landscape projects which were at a larger scale, and it had many elements. But today we saw like a single element can create a landscape in a place where we can't imagine. Like the first project which you showed, which had that red circle going around, that was like really interesting.
Yeah,
It was
the infinity bed.
just a modular system which was repeated in a circular pattern, and it created a kind of landscape in that in the surrounding.
Correct. Right. What do you what did you think of the pocket park, the Chinese one in Shanghai? Chirag.
That was also interesting when we look at it. So uh, uh, not much elements was used, but the same concept of using a less element, and also what Shravan said, that the we thought of a landscape as a trees and all that things, but it can be made without them also.
Mhm. Okay. Okay. Anyone else, or should we? Uh,
Aparna.
Aparna?
Yeah, hi. I found I don't remember the project's name, but the one with the moss balls. I found it to be the most interesting because it looked like this blooming flower to me, and to walk through that, it would be so cool to that experience of that. It'll be like a canopy coming over your head and you walking straight through it. I found that project to be the most interesting, and also the cemetery project, because I have never seen anything like it, and I feel that even if it's a place where like the like people are laid to rest, it could also be a place where people can come and reflect in solitude, just because of the way the landscape and the surrounding and the architecture has come together basically, and it's not like creepy to hang out in a graveyard basically.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't think of the Kokedama project the way you described it, which is actually in a sense it's like an inverse canopy. It does that. Like it's so I yeah, very interesting observation. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I love the cemetery. I mean, one day, I mean, Enrique Miralles is buried there, so maybe I'll also get buried. Okay, anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so
Any,
I discovered Enrique Morales very late in life, like because I almost stopped looking at architectural projects and architects after I'd finished my master's in landscape architecture, and Enrique Morales never kind of figured out. So the first time I heard about him and read about him and I saw his drawings, my God, I mean that was like a moment that I still remember, you know. Yeah, so it's beautiful. You should see his work. You should actually see the way he draws up spaces as well.
Thanks, Jude. It's the first time I've seen his work, so I'm going to go explore it. And yeah, I would urge students to note these names, and probably you should look up more projects. And the more you look, the better, you'll get to
correct.
understand more. Yeah.
Correct, exactly. I think, yeah, I mean, in no way, like, these presentations we're doing are um, prescriptive, like, saying that ऐसे ही होता है. Like, we're just opening up some avenues, and I think then it's up to you guys to kind of read more, look for some more, and use these as just starting points. Like, starting points that we shown you something, but that's not कि ऐसे ही होना है, or like, that's the only thing you can do. I mean, we wouldn't be here if there are kind of fixed ways to do things. Yeah, we're here so that we open up new ways of doing things. So yeah, so that's it. I think like let's see that, like, you guys read a little more, find out a little more, and yeah, find your own inspiration. Okay, I think yeah, Sandeep, I think we can get to the next stage of the part. I think you're on mute, Sandeep.
Oh yeah. So thank you, Jude, for that wonderful presentation. I mean, frankly, I don't think as a landscape architect I would have even known half of those projects. So so thank you for kind of showing us that landscapes does not necessarily have to be landscapes, like how many of the students realized and they kind of spoke about it. That's I think one that eureka moment is like what we really need for the studio. So good. Um, the second part is that that now that we've seen the presentation, I hope all of you have paid attention to it, and I hope all of you have kind of done your first assignment well. Now we move to the second assignment, which essentially is an extension of the first assignment, but it is an exercise of its own. Okay. Now, unlike the earlier assignment wherein we had given you 5 turns of discussion, in this particular of 4 turns of discussion rather, in this particular assignment we only get 1 turn of discussion, which basically means that we introduce the project today, we have a discussion in the next class, and in the very next class, that is 5th of August, we have the submission. Okay, so which basically means that we need you to be sharp, quick, focused, to the point. And if you actually, when you understand this assignment, you'll realize that It's not something that's physically very demanding, but it's something which really needs you to kind of think, both spatially as well as sensorially, and then kind of become a part of that project, and then kind of do it. And we need you to think intelligently. I mean, that's the essence of this particular assignment. So yeah. So what I can do is I can just share my screen. Just let me know if you can see my screen. Can you all see
Yes,
my screen?
we can see.
Okay,
Yes.
sure. Yeah. Yeah. So this assignment is essentially called Explorations in Space, or Binary Responses. So what we are going to do is, I mean, you don't necessarily have to read what is written there. I'll share this with you in a minute. So what we are essentially doing is, the site that you took in your phase one of your submission, okay, you need to kind of pick out some elements out of it and design a landscape of your own, but one that evokes certain metaphors or evokes certain emotions, or evokes certain reactions. And you don't design it once, but you design it twice. Okay, now how does that work is this, okay, the task that is there on your screen. So you are asked to basically consider a patch of 25 meters by 25 meters. Now, it's not necessary that you take the entire 25 by 25. If somebody wants to take a 5 meter by a 20-meter stretch, that's also possible. Okay, so you are asked to kind of consider a 25 by 25-meter patch of land in a seemingly flat topography, which overlooks a landscape scenery. There's a reason why we specify on the landscape scenery is because that landscape scenery essentially gives you a sort of a visual context to, the landscape that you're wanting to do. Now, you can pick up the essence of the landscape that you studied or the landscape of your memory, that you kind of documented in the first submission. You can pick that up. You can use that as the basis for this 25 by 25-meter patch of land, and you need to evoke the following responses. So there are 26 of you in each group, okay, and we immediately after this class we'll kind of assign this to you, so that there are only there are, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, there are 7, right? So that there are only like 3 groups doing wet and dry, 3 groups doing light and dark, 3 groups doing heavy and light, so 3 students, sorry, not groups anymore. So this is an individual exercise. So what you need to do is each of you have to design it. Like for example, if let's say um, Aparna, wants to kind of take up her landscape project and then kind of uh, place it onto this particular project. She can move around her entities or her elements as long as the essence is kept intact. She could use any one of the 3 entities. Okay, she could basically use, let's say, vegetation as her primary entity to kind of enhance and evoke any one of the binary pairs. Let's say it's heavy and light. Okay, so Aparna then chooses to take her project, places it on this in this new canvas, and then so she's aware of the scale, she's aware of the entities which are there, she's aware of the experience that one gets while one is in that space. But then she uses vegetation, so which basically vegetation means trees, plants, ground cover, shrubs. Like it's like a whole gamut of things, right? She enhances that project with vegetation and creates one scenario which kind of evokes the sense of heaviness. Okay, so heaviness does not necessarily mean, in terms of weight, but heaviness could also be a visual heaviness or a visual lightness. It could also be a spatial kind of a feeling of heaviness or a spatial kind of feeling of lightness, right? Of flamboyance, so it could be multiple things. It could be interpreted in many ways. So she would create one option which basically conveys that sense of heaviness. She would create one option which conveys that sense of lightness. Okay. Now she could use vegetation as a primary, entity to kind of curate this experience. But she could also use the other two, earthwork and water, sparingly, so that they don't become the hero or the heroine of the project. Like they become the side actors, but vegetation then plays an important role in doing it. Now, for example, let's say somebody else, let's say Bhushan, for example, Bhushan chooses water as his primary entity, And so Bhushan's scheme is about, let's say, a water's edge, and how he and his friends used to go and sit there and have these conversations, and would kind of move it through, see it through the seasons and do fishing and things like that. So if, let's say, he uses water, and let's say his entities are, oh no, let's say stationary and mobile, okay, or let's say wet and dry, or heavy and light, no, let's say warm and cold, yeah, let's get something very difficult to imagine. Yeah, so if it's water, then how does he kind of, so he doesn't have to basically place take the same site. All he has to do is take the essence of that site and transfer it into this patch of land. So which is why Jude's presentation is very, very important today, because most of the projects that he showed today were like, they were devoid of the context, like, some of them were rooted in the context, but many of them were like, let's say, the Kokedama circle, or let's say the Kanagawa Institute, or even plug and the play and park, or park and play, yeah. So all of these projects, they could be anywhere in the world, right? I mean, it does not necessarily have to be, let's say, Godavari ke beach mein, ya fir, like here or there. It could be anywhere. Okay. So that's exactly what you're doing. So consider this like, I don't know if you've heard of garden shows in the world, but like, there are these garden shows that happen around the world, and I think there are a few that happen in India as well. So, very, very famous garden shows, basically what they do is, they have certain dioramas that are created. Okay, dioramas are basically these patches of land wherein garden designers come in and they create a landscape, with a pavilion or something. It's almost like the India International Trade that happens, in Delhi every year, wherein each state has a pavilion, and, they kind of design it. And or it's like the Serpentine Gallery, in London, like, so I mean, like, a landscape or a piece of architecture that kind of changes every year, but then it's a temporary landscape that's kind of put together or created. So you kind of look at it almost like an experience. It's an experiential landscape, like you kind of move through that space and you experience it. So that's exactly how this is to be designed. So don't get me wrong, don't get bogged down by the fact that, oh, but my landscape was on the edge of a river. That's okay. I mean, what we want is to kind of encapsulate that essence of it and then bring it to this 25-meter by 25-meter patch. So this 25-meter by 25-meter patch could be like Shivaji Park, like, or any other Maidan, like, you just imagine it as a clean slate, like a clean slate. Or you can imagine it as, no, I mean, it's in the middle of a city, it's probably a pocket park, so you have a context near it, but the experience that you want to create is from the first project. So I hope you're getting me right. You don't have to get bogged down by the existing site that you've studied. Okay, the idea is to capture the essence and redo it using any one of these entities: earthwork, water, or vegetation, while the other two can be used sparingly, because it can't be a project with only vegetation, right? I mean, it has to be on soil, so there'll be earthwork. Now, let's say somebody else chooses earthwork, and his or her, notion is about deep and shallow. So, how do you then, using, like, in the 25-meter by 25-meter, do you then create a gash in a park? It's almost like that R&R landscape, RCR, architectures project, like, wherein, like, the just by piling the gravel and, kind of making the people walk on a certain level, like, what do you kind of achieve? So, you could then create these senses of it. Now, whatever I'm saying is what comes to my mind at the moment, but I'm sure if you explore it with your mentors, your faculty mentors, I'm sure you'll find there are, umpteen ways of, kind of evoking the feeling of deep depth, or evoking the feeling of shallowness. Now, this could also be reinterpreted in many ways. It doesn't have to be a physical depth, it could mean something else as well. So that's what this assignment is about. I hope it's clear. If it isn't, you can actually unmute and ask right away. Shoot your question so that we don't waste time, or none of us get WhatsApp messages on Wednesday night at 9:45 in the night saying that, Sandeep, I have a doubt. I don't think, I understand. It's okay. We are always approachable. Like, if there is a problem, always approach us. But if it can be tackled earlier, it's all the more better. So, any questions, any doubts, or is it's a simple exercise, right? It's kind of imaginative. It needs you to think critically. It needs you to think creatively, and then kind of come up with a solution. Any questions? Because if you
Yeah, a
don't,
couple of
Yeah, what
students have
does
raised hands. Tanvi.
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, what does earthwork constitutes?
Sorry, then we'll have to ask it once again.
What does earthwork constitute? Like what all
Ah,
things,
okay, okay,
what
okay.
all elements?
Okay, sure. Yeah. Okay, so vegetation essentially means, plants. Okay, so it could mean trees, it could mean shrubs. Now, when I say shrubs, there are different types of shrubs, right? I mean, some which are leggy, like through which you could see through. Like if you're sitting, I can see what's happening around, but if I'm standing, then it kind of covers me. Like tall shrubs which could, like kind of define spaces. Like not let me see through. But there could also be shrubs which are low in height, right? I mean, shrubs which are, which could possibly cover a much larger area. There could also be ground cover. Okay, so what do I mean by ground cover? Ground covers are those plants which are kind of planted in clusters, or they grow in clusters and they kind of cover a large portion of the ground. Then there is lawn, like, so lawn is also a kind of ground cover. So vegetation is like, it kind of includes all of this. Okay, that's one. Second is when it comes to earthwork, what it basically means is, the land. Okay. Now, the land, the soil, the rocks, all of it, like the geology and the topography kind of put together. So, earthwork could mean you could also move things around, like you could cut a gash in the ground, you could pile up soil, and create mounds in there. Or the entire canvas that you have could basically be a undulating topography, like the park in China, the red earth park in China that Jude kind of showed. That's a classic example of a park which, although that's not really man-made, that's natural. But in this case, you could kind of imagine and kind of draw it up. So earthwork would mean all of it. Okay, so anything to do with that, the ground and the soil and the earth. So that's earthwork. Now, when it comes to water, it could it could mean a stream that kind of flows through your site to, let's say, a skin of water, like which is basically just reflective. I mean, there is a scenery and there is a skin of water that is reflexive. I mean, that would probably be like what, 2 centimeters deep, but then on a smooth surface of the ground. Like it's intent is just to reflect the scenery, or that when I'm walking through, like it just touches the sole of my feet. That's it. So or water could also mean the trickling of a fountain. It could mean many things. Okay, so you're clear about the entities, right? What does earthwork mean? What does vegetation mean? What does water mean? Like in this case, yes or no?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, sure. So, and you're clear that you have to make two drawings. Okay, so it's essentially the same site, the same project. The entities remain the same, the boundaries remain the same. Your whatever you've gotten in from your earlier site, that also remains the same. But what changes is basically the use of your entity. Like maybe you can add more trees in one, maybe in the other one you don't add trees at all. If it's earthwork, maybe in one you kind of create the gash, the other one you're not kind of creating a gash, but rather you are kind of creating a promontory, like something that kind of moves out into the ground. So you could play around with it. So the boundaries remain the same, but just by changing the entity, like how do you kind of achieve, let's say, depth and shallowness, or how do you kind of achieve openness, or the feeling of being in an enclosed space, enclosure, so how do you do that? So you have two drawings placed side by side. You'll have sections which are cut from the same location, in geographically in the same location, but then because the entities have been moved around, you'd get two different experiences. So that's the exercise. Okay, now what you need to do today is to kind of talk to your faculty members very quickly, show them your earlier submission, and kind of talk about, so start thinking right away, like start thinking about, maybe I'd like to kind of use these entities, or that is the essence that I want to take up from my project and kind of use it into my next project. Think about it, have a quick conversation. What we would like to see next class is a reference inference album. Okay, so what that basically means is, depending on your primary choice of the entity. So I would request faculty members to kind of assign these to the students rather than the students pick them up, because otherwise what will happen is, our experience with the past is everybody chooses wet and dry, everybody chooses water. It's easy, like it's a no brainer. So I think what one should ideally do is, like maybe assign, if we have 26 students, we assign 1 to 7 as tuck, 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 tuck. And then the first person gets vegetation, the second person, or maybe we let them choose the entity, but maybe we assign the binaries to them. Okay, so once you get your binary and you quickly choose your entity, what we we need to do is you need to kind of quickly create a reference inference album. Okay, now what does that album mean is that, let's say for example, a student gets vegetation. Okay, now a student chooses to work with vegetation as a natural entity, and the binary that she's working with is wet and dry. Okay, now what she does is she collects 20 reference images that depicts the various characteristics of vegetation that, out of the 20, maybe 10 of them, kind of speak about wetness, 10 of them speak about dryness, like, or it doesn't even have to be 10 and 10, it could be like 8 and 12, it could be any. But so the idea is that you have these 25 centimeter by, everything is written very clearly in this document. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm unable to kind of collate my thoughts because there's a lot of things happening around me. Okay, so basically a 5 centimeter by 5 centimeter. So you kind of put in your 20 reference images. You can collect it from anywhere, internet, or photographs that you've clicked, or photographs from the site, or photographs from your own blog. It could be from anywhere. These are just being used as these just as tiles, like almost like inspiration tiles. So you do those 20 photographs or clips, or it could even be sketches, but yeah, so you have them in place. And then comes the important part. Okay, you go through those 20, and then you create two sets of 5 sketches. Okay, so 5 sketches that depict wetness, 5 sketches that depict dryness. So those sketches could be like an edge detail, it could be an overall plan, it could just be, you know it could just be textures, but that kind of convey that binary, the one of the binaries that you're kind of speaking about. Okay, so 20 reference images, 5 sketches that define one half of the binary, 5 sketches that define the other half of the binary. Now these sketches have to come from um, your reference album. So that is the reference and that's the inference. Okay, so in the next class, and now, and let us be very clear, we faculty members thought that it's important for you to kind of go through this, is because otherwise, if we throw, let's say, stationary and mobile, and we throw earthwork, or a student chooses earthwork as her entity, you're going to get confused. You're going to keep thinking, how can I depict stationary or mobile through earthwork? But then this is probably a device with which you could actually enter the project much faster. Okay, so that is about the reference inference album. And in the next class, we would like to see you, kind of draw this out. Okay, so you have your reference inference album ready, and an initial sketch, which could be a plan, which could be a section, which could be any other mode of drawing, as long as it's drawn to scale. Okay, so you are in this particular exercise, you're not allowed to distort the scale, because if you distort it, you'll understand what that is. Like for example, we've had experiences wherein people were creating these underground tunnels, which were like, maybe 500 meters in length, and 300 meters in width. We look at a section as with respect to the human being that's drawn, and the reality is the site that is given to you is only 25 meters by 25 meters. So how do you kind of evoke that feeling of being inside a cave in that? So which is why, drawing to scale is very, very important. Okay, so in this particular exercise, stick to scale, but you don't have to stick to a plan, section, elevation kind of a scenario for the first discussion. It could be an oblique, it could be a 3D image or whatever. But the final submission basically asks for two plans which are placed next to each other, drawn in the same scale, preferably 1 is to 50. And there's a reason why we specify on 1 is to 50. It's easier for us to read while it's on a computer screen. It's also easier for you to work. And at 1 is to 50, you may start seeing textures. You may start seeing, different entities, which in a 1 is to 100 scale, or 1 is to 200 or 1000, it's impossible to kind of discern. Okay. So 1 is to 50, and 1 is to 50 is probably in 25 meters. 25 meters is probably an easy scale for you to kind of draw up with whatever drawings or the A1 sheets or A2 sheets like kind of stuck together at home. It's still possible for you to kind of do that, or even two A3 sheets kind of stuck together. You may be able to kind of draw that up, like if you want to work like manually. That is one. Second is we need you to kind of draw out sections of both the binaries, preferably from the same spot, because we want you to kind of realize that just a small twist of things, the kind of change that happens. Like for example, that um, um, that pocket garden that Jude showed. There was a photograph of what it was before and what it eventually became, right? I mean, there's a sea of difference if you look at the sectional understanding of both of it. So now these sections could be sectional perspectives as well. Now the submission could be sketched or it could be digitally put together. And we would urge you not to just finish it off with a plan and a section. Maybe in the next turn show us an oblique or a 3D, like which is drawn to scale. So one very easy way of doing this, and I learned this while I was in my masters, and it was like a serendipitous moment for me when I actually learned how to do this. If you draw a plan, okay, like physically, you just turn it around, like you turn it around and stick it to your table, and you overlay a tracing sheet on top of it. So you kind of turn it around like an isometric, like the plan kind of takes an isometric form, even though it's a plan, but you put a tracing sheet on top of it. And then if you start drawing things, like if you start extrapolating the 3D of it, start drawing from what is closer to me to what is beyond, you will actually get a two scale isometric drawing or an axonometric drawing depending on which angle are you placing the plan. You'll easily get it. Okay, so it's almost like you're drawing on top of it. It's a very easy way of kind of drawing an oblique, and then you can actually supplement it with all sorts of sketched calls and call outs and like basic drawings, etc. And the assignment tab will be created for you on 5th of August. So that's a submission. It will be created a few days before. Now, the challenge for us is we have today to quickly clear it out with your faculty mentors. What are you trying to do, or what would you like to do? Get your faculty mentors to assign the binaries to you, and you can choose your entities to kind of respond to the binary. If the faculty mentor thinks that that entity doesn't do justice to what you could do, then they are free to change it. Okay, but however, we leave this to you. And I specifically told you the reason why we are not letting you choose this is because otherwise we'll all have wet and dry with water, or like deep and shallow with earthwork. I mean that's like a no-brainer. So look at it as a challenge and kind of do it. So this is today's class. Next class, we would like to see your reference inference album and your first cut explorations. Like could be hand drawn or could be digitally drawn. But come to class, show it to your faculty mentors. Okay, now there is a very very disturbing trend that we've been seeing, and especially in allied design, that many of you have not been turning into your classes. Many of you have not been coming to classes. You've not been discussing with your faculty mentors. Trust us, this is being taken very seriously. And we'll have to report this to the dean and the college, because that's what we've been told. So you need to kind of take it extremely seriously. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of paste this on the chat as well as in the file section, so that there is ease of access for you. You may log out and have a discussion with your faculty mentors, faculty students. If you have any doubts, maybe we can get it clarified. I'll have to step out for a second. I mean, the faculty members will answer your questions. Yeah.
So two things. One, I had a doubt was that what is the new site that we're looking at? It is an actual physical space that is different from the first one, right? Or are we looking at any kind of 25 by 20-meter plot, like it's an imaginary kind of just a flat sort of ground?
Yeah, we are looking at the same site that you have studied previously or mapped previously, but we allow you the flexibility to tweak it a little, or go, not exactly stick to that spot. Maybe you could waver around a bit, but you should have adequate information about that. We encourage you to, like, take out the essence of that space and use it in your landscape, basically.
I- Yeah,
And
I think Sayukta, like, hello, Sayukta.
yeah, go
I
on, Joe.
maybe no, no. When Sandeep comes back, I think let him just clarify on this, because even uh, have a little query on this in terms of what Shravan also asked. So maybe Sandeep can also give his opinion. So Shravan, hang on. Let Sandeep come back and we'll just clarify this. Yeah, because I was also not clear whether they take. It seemed to me also that they take another site and not their own site. It's more. It's something which is not very tied to site. So it's almost like it's a blank slate and it's a tabula rasa. If there's nothing there and you're kind of thinking in abstract, you're thinking of something that is not really dependent on site. Yeah, so that's what I also understood. But maybe like Sandeep can clarify. So just hang on, Shravan. Yeah.
Okay. And also, we have a TOS submission scheduled in a schedule right after the 5th. I think it's on the 7th. Yeah. So because I
This,
think we were given the submission schedule to kind of make sure that our submissions don't clash. And what's happening now is that all these submissions are happening in the same weeks again, which is what was happening last semester and the semester before that. So I was just if
okay.
there's any
This
clash
also has
because
to
the next allied
discuss
submission
with.
is on 19th, I think.
Okay. You'll have to discuss this with Sandeep because he will be coordinating in terms of dates and about with your class coordinator. So
I
we
mean, see,
he
you're
can
going to
check.
have, Shravan, you're going to have work for every class. Okay, so because we're calling it a submission, does not mean that, like, so you will have work for every class. So we're expecting that, we're not going to go into one kind of massive submission, but every class you have something that which is typical. Like, I mean, even for architectural design, we expect that, okay, you do step one, next class you're doing step two. It's not that we're not kind of seeing work and suddenly at the end we're seeing 10 things together. So this is so I think if we don't label it a submission, but we say that this is what I expected next class, that we come up with these initial ideas on how you're going to kind of conceive of these landscapes using these keywords and these emotions and metaphors. It's as good as, like, what we did in the previous class. Yeah, so the class prior to that, where it's a discussion. We're not like, it's not ki, okay, okay, now you're stuck with the idea that it's a discussion. You have two, three options, come up with it. We have a discussion. Yeah. So every class you will have work. I think that's not.
No,
That's,
Jude, actually, that is totally fine. Like we actually have noticed that this is how the course has to work. That we have to work for every class. That is not a unit test kind of a thing where we have to just work for one day. But
it is
what we were
one.
informed is that
Yeah.
the markings will happen on specified dates which are
Ah,
allotted.
okay.
Per week, only one subject will be marked was what we were
Yes.
informed initially.
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair. Whatever has been submitted, I think so. Sandeep, Rutika will have those dates, right? So that we'll mark on those dates. That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
No,
yeah.
which is
we
the
are
next
following.
submission.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we are following that exact calendar. Do you want me to show you that course tracker? We are taking submissions only on those days.
No, I think
Okay,
Sandeep,
Sandeep.
there is another submission that is I think clashing. We need to know what subject submission is
Which
that.
subject is this?
Or should we share the submission which we have with us?
Ah,
With
yes.
landscape submission, it shows that we have 90 landscape submission on 19th. We can share the schedule which Meenal shared with us.
Please share it because I need to see that. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and this is the course tracker. Yep.
Sandeep, let's see what they have.
Yeah, yeah. So this is it. Like this is our start date was basically, where is it? Drawing narratives, right? Yeah, drawing narratives. Start date was 1/7 and our end date was this. This was submission date 22/07, which is today. Our next submission starts from this date and it ends on 5th. Pachakuchas, I mean, there are other submissions which you will eventually get to know for landscape. There are other things, and this is your IDS. Yeah, Technology Studio. Yeah, here are your Technology Studio dates. 14 of must have gone, 11, and this is the comprehensive submission tracker for all the years together. I don't think there is any other document that is valid. If there is any document that is valid, this is the only one.
I have sent it.
Sandeep.
Okay. The landscape assignment has been, I mean, the document that I was showing to you, we placed it in the link. The link is in the chat. You can actually access it. Yeah, I'll just open this and see what this is. No, this is not a document. This is Tanvi. Sorry, this is not that document. There is a comprehensive course tracker that has been made. You can talk to your year masters about it, your coordinators about it.
Yeah, because we asked Meenal for a submission Excel sheet, so she sent us this on our class email ID.
No,
We
this is
talked.
not the one. This is definitely not the one. Yeah.
So 20th, what you have? Sorry, there is a I can see that 19th and 20th there are two back-to-back